Woke up in a hospital bed with a concussion I got while saving my girlfriend. The first thing that came to mind was to play a little joke. "Who are you?" I asked, looking at her. I saw Chloe's expression freeze, and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. But then she pointed to her best friend, Aria, who was standing beside her. "I'm a friend of your fiance," she said coolly. "This is your fiance, Aria?" My smile froze on my face. Aria took a step forward, her expression unreadable. "That's right. I'm your fiance." I forced a weak smile. "Then let's go home." Aria took me home. Her home. I looked around the unfamiliar apartment, a space that held absolutely no trace of my existence. No photos, no stray jacket, nothing. I lowered my head and started fiddling with my phone, trying to ground myself. "Do you want to get some rest first?" Aria's voice was soft, gentle. She was playing the part of a loving fiancé perfectly. "Okay." I nodded, using the amnesia as a perfect excuse to let her lead me to the bedroom. She seemed to let out a breath of relief. Once I was lying down, I closed my eyes. The air filled with her scent, unfamiliar but surprisingly pleasant. A few minutes later, I heard a familiar voice drift in from the other room. "Aria, you're the best friend a girl could ask for. Please just pretend to be his fiancé." For a little while, it was Chloe. I sat up, peering through the crack of the bedroom door, which wasn't fully closed. "Aren't you afraid he'll get his memory back one day?" Aria asked. I must have thought I was asleep. Chloe had her on speakerphone, her voice filling the quiet apartment. "Oh, please. If he remembers, I'll just cool at him a little. Give him a few kisses and hugs, and he'll melt," Chloe said, with a syrupy sweetness that felt like a shard of glass in my gut. "He loves me so much, he'd never dream of leaving me." So that's what I was to her. Replaceable. A piece of trash she could throw away and pick back up whenever she felt like it. All because I loved her too much. "I'm just a little bored," she continued, her voice light and careless. "We've been together for so long. I just need a little space, a little excitement, to feel alive again. Won't be for long. And I know you can't stand Ethan. So just think of it as doing me a huge favor, okay?" I never heard Aria's reply. She walked further away, her voice fading. I pushed myself up, opened the door, and slowly walked toward the balcony where she stood. This should give her a scare. A wicked little thought surfaced. But as if she sensed me, Aria turned around. Our eyes met. She quickly ended the call and walked toward me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her head against my chest. "I thought you were resting. Why are you up already?" She snuggled against me, and for a surreal moment, it felt like we really were a couple who had been in love for years. "I'm a little hungry," I said, my smile never reaching my eyes. Aria didn't seem to notice. "What do you feel like eating? How about the perfect omelet?" Her words made me pause. My love for a perfectly cooked, fluffy omelet was a small, secret thing. Not even Chloe knew about it. "Okay." I nodded. I gently unwound her arms from my waist, feeling a strange sense of unease, and sat down at the small dining table. Aria didn't seem to mind, simply turning and heading into the kitchen. I watched as she expertly tied on an apron and began to cook. I rested my chin in my hand, a dizzying sense of déjà vu watching over me. This was it. This was the scene I had always imagined for my future married life. Just never imagined I'd be living it with my fiancé's best friend soon. A golden, fragrant omelet was placed in front of me. Aria sat opposite me, her chin propped in her hand, watching me with a warm, genuine smile. My heart gave a sharp, painful jolt. I quickly looked down, scooped up a bite, and brought it to my mouth. It was perfect. Unbelievably good. "Is it good?" I didn't answer. My body was more honest than my words as I quickly took another bite. Aria laughed softly at my eagerness. She leaned forward and gently brushed a stray crumb from the corner of my mouth with her fingertip. "No one's going to steal it from you," she teased. "Slow down. If anyone saw you, they'd think I was starving you." The sudden intimacy made me press my lips together. For a split second, our eyes met, and I heard a frantic, pounding heartbeat. Was it hers or mine? I didn't know. I looked away, tilting my head back, slightly. Seeing my hesitation, Aria just smiled a sad, knowing little smile and leaned in to press a feather. Light kiss to my forehead. "It's okay," she whispered. "I know you've forgotten me. We can take it slow, all right?" Looking into her deep, gentle eyes, I found myself nodding before I could even think, but none of it made sense. For all the years I'd known her, Aria had never shown the slightest interest in me. In fact, everything about her behavior suggested she felt the same way. Chloe claimed she did, that she hated me. I stared at her, trying to solve the puzzle. Which one was the real Aria? I'm going to party with some friends tonight, she said, breaking the silence. Do you want to come? Friends? An image of Chloe flashed in my mind. Yes. When Aria led me into the private room, I was hit by a chaotic mix of perfume and alcohol. It was packed, a tangle of bodies and loud music. Chloe was sitting right in the center of it all, with a familiar man beside her. Leo, her high school sweetheart, the one that got away. As we watched, the crowd roared them on, and they fell into a deep Beshenitkish. They only broke apart when they saw me enter. I could see the glint of challenge in Leo's eyes. Oh, you're here? Chloe said, leaning against Leo's shoulder with a lazy smile. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my boyfriend Leo. She punctuated the announcement with a sweet, shy kiss on his cheek. Hey. I'm Leo, he said, extending a hand to me, his smile warm and disarming, as if the look he'd just given me was a figment of my imagination. Nice to meet you, I replied politely, acting as if I'd never seen him before, but I'd seen him 100 times. Photos on Chloe's phone, in the pages of her diary, in the drunken, sentimental whispers she thought I couldn't hear. I followed Aria to a quieter corner and sat down. No one spoke to us, but I could feel their eyes darting between the four of us, hungry for drama. In this circle, I had always been the butt of the joke, but tonight, with Aria by my side, they seemed to keep their distance. My gaze drifted to her, was already looking at me, her expression soft and warm, seeing the silent exchange between us. Chloe, who had been cuddling with Leo, suddenly sat up straighter. Her eyes narrowed at Aria, her voice dripping with an acid I didn't recognize. You and your fiance seem to be getting along really well, he said, her tone sharp. You've got all your friends here, but it's like you can't see anyone but him. The sourness in her voice was unmistakable. It was the bitterness of someone who felt like they were being cheated on. And yet she was the one who had pushed me into Aria's arms. I almost laughed. Of course we do, I said, unable to resist. The sound of my voice cut through the noise. We're engaged. It's only natural that we'd be close. Silence. The entire room seemed to freeze. All right. Enough of that. Let's play a game. Someone shouted, breaking the tension. Chloe shot Aria a dark look before settling back with her boyfriend. Let's play the king's game. The person suggested whoever draws the king card to pick two numbers and make them do any dare they want. The idea was met with enthusiastic approval. After the first round, the two numbers called belonged to Chloe and her boyfriend. The king's command. They had to French kiss for 2 minutes and post a video of it online. As they kissed, I could feel Leo's eyes on me, watching for reaction when he saw my face was a mask of indifference. He finally turned his full attention back to Chloe. When they finished, Chloe looked at me, a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But when she saw me calmly sipping my drink, she visibly relaxed. The second round, the chosen numbers were mine and Chloe's. The dare. I had to carry her princess style and do 5 deep squats. As the others grinned knowingly, I smiled right back. Chloe glanced at Leo, whose face had hardened, then stood up with an impatient sigh, as if being paired with me was a punishment. Can't we pick someone else? I have a boyfriend. I looked up at her, at the undisguised annoyance on her face, and I let out a soft laugh. You're right. At my response, Chloe froze, looking at me in disbelief. What did you say? You're right, I repeated, letting a hint of regret color my voice. You have a boyfriend, and I have a fiance. We shouldn't be doing games like this together. Dramatically. I guess I'll just take the penalty drink for failing the challenge. The moment I reached for my glass, Chloe's hand shot out to stop me. Her face was a storm cloud of anger. I can do it with you, he said, the words practically forced through her clenched teeth. No, that's okay, I said, shaking my head as she glared daggers at me. Aria would get upset. I turned to look at Aria, who was watching the exchange with a surprised expression of her own. That's what I used to call you, right? I asked her, my voice full of faint confusion. Or was it Ari? Or maybe sweetheart? I was dancing on every one of Chloe's last nerves. As expected, in the next second, she grabbed Aria by the arm and stormed out of the room. I followed a moment later, using the excuse of being worried. At the end of the hallway, Chloe's voice was shaking with rage. Aria, what the hell have you done to Ethan? I haven't done anything, Aria replied, her voice and expression a picture of pure innocence. Isn't this how he always was with you? He was always so terrified of making you angry. She continued calmly. The only thing that's changed is the person he's afraid of upsetting. His devotion is the same. Aria's words hit their mark. Chloe bit her lip, taking several deep breaths. unable to find a single word to refute the truth. I'm warning you, Chloe finally spat out. Stay away from him. I asked you to act. I didn't ask you to make it real. I know, Aria replied, her calm smile never wavering. You know I can't stand him. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and went back to the party. When they returned, they were arm in arm, the perfect image of inseparable best friends. The party raged on. I ignored the challenging glances sent my way and allowed myself to relax and mingle. My newfound ease seemed to catch Chloe's attention, and I felt her eyes on me throughout the night. Perhaps she was just surprised to see the quiet, boring man she'd grown tired of suddenly become so alive. Late that night, everyone went their separate ways. Aria helped me back to her apartment, supporting my drunken, stumbling form. The moment I sank into the soft mattress of the bed, I grabbed her wrist.
Aria.
My voice husky with alcohol seemed to catch her off guard. She stood frozen by the bed, her cheeks flushed. On the outside, I was a drunken mess, but inside, my mind was perfectly clear. I needed to prove something. With a gentle tug, I pulled her off balance. The moment I pulled Aria off balance, the world seemed to slow to the rhythmic, heavy thumping of my own pulse. She gasped, a soft, sharp intake of air, as she fell forward. I had expected her to fight it, to brace herself with her hands or twist away. With the practiced coldness she had shown me for the 3 years I had been with
Chloe.
Instead, she let herself fall. She landed beside me on the mattress, her body stiffening for a fraction of a second before she slowly turned her head to look at me. Our faces were inches apart. The faint scent of her perfume, something crisp and earthy, like rain on cedar, mixed with a heavy, sweet trace of the cocktails we'd had at the party. Ethan, she whispered. Her voice lacked the cool, collected edge she wore like armor in public. It was fragile, almost trembling. You're drunk. You need to sleep. I am drunk, I lied, keeping my voice thick, letting my eyelids droop just enough to sell the performance. My grip on her wrist didn't loosen. But my head is clear. Or maybe it isn't. Everything feels different. Like I've been looking at a blurry picture my whole life, and suddenly someone adjusted the lens. Aria's eyes, dark and deep as a midnight sea, searched mine. There was a desperate, searching quality to her gaze, as if she were trying to read the microscopic shifts in my pupils. What do you mean? You? I said, reaching up with my free hand to gently trace the line of her
Jaw.
She shivered at the touch, but she didn't pull away. Why do I feel like I know the shape of your face better than my own name? Why does it feel like I've been waiting to come back to this room for a very long time? It was a cruel test. I knew it was. I was using her own lie, the fiction that we were engaged, a lie she had agreed to paint for Chloe's selfish amusement, and twisting it. I wanted to see where the actress ended and the real Aria began. A tear, hot and silent, slipped from the corner of her eye, tracking slowly down her cheek to wet my fingertips. Because Aria swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. She closed her eyes, leaning slightly into my hand. When she spoke, the words sounded like they were being dragged from the deepest, most guarded cavern of her chest. Because we've always belonged together. Even when you didn't know it. Even when you were looking somewhere else. My breath hitched. The sheer honesty in her voice was a physical blow. There was no mockery here. No careless boredom of the kind Chloe had exhibited on the
Phone.
This was a raw, bleeding truth. Aria, I murmured, my heart doing a strange, violent flip. Sleep, Ethan, she whispered, her hand rising to cover mine, gently pressing my palm against her cheek before she slid it down, freeing herself from my grip. She sat up, the cool night air immediately rushing into the space she had vacated. We have all the time in the world now. Just sleep. I closed my eyes, feigning the heavy, sudden descent of a drunkard's slumber.
I
lay there, perfectly still, regulating my breathing. A few minutes passed. The rustle of sheets told me she was tucking me in.
Then,
the soft click of her footsteps across the hardwood floor. She didn't leave the room. Instead, she pulled a chair to the bedside. In the quiet of the night, I heard her let out a long, ragged sigh. If only you had forgotten her sooner, she whispered to the darkness, her voice
cracking.
If only I hadn't been so afraid. I stayed awake for hours after that, staring into the dark long after her. Breathing had synchronized into the slow, steady rhythm of sleep. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was far more terrifying, and far more beautiful than I had ever anticipated. The next morning, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling butter woke
Me.
I sat up, rubbing my temples. The mild headache from the night before was real, a lingering souvenir of my actual concussion. I slipped out of bed, wearing the oversized t-shirt and sweatpants Aria had provided, items that I realized with a sudden jolt fit me perfectly. If this was a spare apartment with no trace of my existence, where had these clothes come from? They weren't new. They had been washed, smelling of the lavender detergent she used. I walked into the living room. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that felt entirely different in the daytime.
It
Was minimalist but warm, filled with lush green plants and bookshelves, overflowing with novels and medical journals. Aria was at the stove, her hair tied up in a messy bun, a few stray dark curls framing her neck. She was wearing a simple, oversized sweater. She looked so entirely different from the aloof, slightly intimidating woman who used to sit in the corner of Chloe's parties, sipping white wine and barely acknowledging my existence. "Morning," I said, leaning against the doorframe. She jumped slightly, turning around with a spatula in hand. A soft pink hue rushed to her cheeks, likely remembering the intimacy of the previous night. "Good morning. How is your head?" "Better," I said, walking over to the kitchen island. "A little foggy, but better." "Sit," she said, gesturing to the bar stool. "Breakfast is almost ready." I watched her cook. There was an effortless grace to her movements.
She sat down.
A plate in front of me, another perfect, golden omelet, lightly dusted with herbs, alongside a cup of black coffee exactly how I liked it. "You know," I said, picking up my fork, "it's funny. I don't remember much.
But
I remember that I hate sugar in my coffee. And I remember." I took a bite of the omelet. It melted on my tongue. "I remember this taste. How did you know?" Aria froze for a fraction of a second, her back to me as she poured her own
coffee.
When she turned around, her face was a mask of gentle amusement. "We've been together a long time, Ethan. Of course I know how you like your coffee.
And
As for the omelet, you used to beg me to make it for you every Sunday." A beautiful lie. I had never eaten her cooking before yesterday. Did I? I murmured, looking directly into her eyes. Then I must have been a very happy man on Sundays. Aria's breath caught. She looked away, clearing her throat as she sat down opposite me. "Eat before it gets cold." We ate in a comfortable silence, but the air between us was thick with unsaid
things.
My mind was racing. How did she know about the omelet? My love for it was a childhood comfort food, something my late grandmother used to make for me. I had mentioned it once, years ago, in a passing conversation at a crowded college party when Chloe had complained about the diner food we were eating. Aria had been sitting at the end of the table, seemingly engrossed in her phone. She had been listening, I realized. Even back then, she was listening to the things Chloe ignored. Before I could dwell on it further, my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with Chloe's name. Aria's eyes darted to the screen, her expression instantly tightening. The soft, domestic warmth in the room vanished, replaced by the cold reality of our arrangement. I picked up the phone and slid the bar to answer, putting it on speaker.
I
Wanted Aria to hear. "Ethan," Chloe's voice shrieked through the speaker, loud and demanding.
Why?
"Haven't you called me? Do you have any idea how embarrassing last night was?" "Good morning to you too, Chloe," I said, my voice deliberately flat, devoid of the eager, pleasing tone I used to adopt whenever she called. There was a pause on the other end. Chloe wasn't used to this version of me, the version that didn't immediately apologize for existing. "Are you still acting like you don't know who I am? The joke isn't funny anymore, Ethan. Aria was supposed to bring you home after you cooled down." "I am home," I said, looking directly at Aria. Aria's eyes widened slightly, her hand gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I'm with my fiance." "Ethan, stop it," Chloe hissed. "Aria is my best friend. She's just helping me out because you were smothering me, okay? We needed a break."
But you
"Don't just get to pretend you're engaged to her. It's weird. People at the party are already talking." "Let them talk," I said calmly. "I don't remember you, Chloe. But I remember how I feel when I'm in this apartment. I remember the smell of this coffee.
I
Remember her. If you're a friend of my fiance, I suggest you respect our boundaries." "You," Chloe gasped, speechlessness a rare occurrence for her. "Aria, are you There? Tell him. Tell him the truth. Aria looked at me, a complex storm of emotions warring in her eyes, guilt, fear, and a dark, illicit spark of hope. She took a slow, deep breath, leaning closer
To the phone.
I told you, Chloe, Aria said, her voice steady, though I could see her shoulder trembling. He has a concussion. The doctors said we shouldn't shock his system with sudden revelations. It could be dangerous for his recovery. We have to play along until his memory returns naturally. This is ridiculous, Chloe screamed. I'm coming over there. We're going to a clinic, and we're getting his head scanned by a real doctor. Actually, Chloe, I cut in, my voice dropping to a cool, warning register.
If
You show up here and stress my fiance, I'll have the building security remove.
you
I don't know what kind of history we had, but right now you're just a loud voice on a phone disturbing my breakfast.
goodbye.
I hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. Aria stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Ethan, you shouldn't have said that to her. She can be very determined when she doesn't get her way. Are you afraid of her? I asked, leaning forward, resting my chin on my hands. No, Aria said quickly, then softened. I'm afraid for you. If she tells you the truth, if she brings proof. What proof? I asked, my smile sharp. Photos? Memories? If they aren't in my head, they don't exist to me. Right now, the only reality I care about is the one in this room. Aria looked down at her plate, her fingers trembling. You shouldn't trust me so easily, Ethan.
I'm
not the good person you think I am. We'll see about that, I whispered. 2 days passed in a strange, intoxicating limbo. I pretended to recover, spending my days reading on Aria's balcony, watching her leave for her shifts at the architecture firm where she worked, and waiting for her return. She was a rising star in her firm, a detail I had only vaguely known before because Chloe used to complain about how Aria was too busy making blueprints to go shopping. Now I saw the dedication. I saw the blueprints rolled up in her study, the meticulous sketches of modern, light-filled spaces. While she was at work, I did some investigating of my own. I didn't want to violate her privacy, but I needed answers. I walked into her study, a room filled with the scent of paper and drafting ink. On the bottom shelf of her bookcase, partially hidden behind a row of heavy structural engineering manuals, was a thick, leather-bound sketchbook. I pulled it out. The leather was worn, the edges scuffed. I opened it. The first page was a sketch of a university campus under a canopy of autumn
leaves.
The drawing was exquisite, done in charcoal. But as I flipped through the pages, my breath caught in my throat. It was me, page after page, spanning years. Me sitting in the library, a pencil tucked behind my ear, frowning at a textbook. Me laughing at some joke, my head tilted back. Me standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over Chloe while my own shoulder was completely
Soaked.
Me looking tired, sitting on a bench outside the exam hall, staring blankly at the ground. Underneath the sketch of me in the rain, there was a small, neat inscription in Aria's handwriting. He gives her the world, and she doesn't even notice the cold. I would build him a shelter from the storm, if only he would look my way. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sheer weight of her hidden love, carried in silence for years while she stood by as Chloe's best friend, was staggering. She had watched me be neglected, dismissed, and used, all while harboring a devotion so deep she had documented it in secret pages. I closed the sketchbook and carefully put it back, exactly where I had found it. I walked back to the living room and sat on the couch, my mind spinning. The anger I had felt toward Chloe was nothing compared to the profound sense of waste I felt for the years I had spent chasing a ghost, while the real thing had been standing right beside me, pretending to hate me just to survive the pain of watching me love someone else. At 5 o'clock, the door unlocked. Aria walked in, looking exhausted, her coat damp from a sudden afternoon drizzle. She looked up, and the moment her eyes met mine, the exhaustion seemed to drain from her face, replaced by that soft, tentative warmth that was becoming my favorite thing in the world.
Hi, she said.
Hi, I replied. I stood up, walked over to her, and took her coat, hanging it up on the rack. How was your day? Long, she said, offering a small smile. But good. We approved the drafts for the new library downtown. I'm proud of you, I said simply. She froze, her eyes widening slightly. It was a simple phrase, but it was clear. She wasn't used to hearing it. Chloe certainly had never praised Aria's achievements without finding a way to make it about herself. Thank you, Aria whispered, her voice thick. I have a surprise for you, I said, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold from the rain, and I instinctively wrapped both of my hands around hers to warm them. I cooked dinner. You did? She looked past me to the dining table, which was set with 2 plates of pasta and a bottle of red wine. I thought you were supposed to be resting. I felt better today, and I wanted to do something for my fiance. I emphasized the word, watching the beautiful, conflicted emotion wash over her face. We sat down to eat. The pasta was simple, a garlic and olive oil recipe I knew by heart, but she ate it as if it were a 5-star meal. We talked about her work, about the architecture of the city, about things I had never realized we shared an interest in. She was brilliant, sharp-witted, and incredibly passionate when she spoke about her designs. Why did you choose architecture? I asked, pouring her another glass of wine. Aria looked at her glass, swirling the red liquid. Because I like the idea of creating something permanent, something that can withstand the weather, the passage of time. A lot of things in life are so fragile, but a well-built home, it stays. She looked up, her gaze locking onto mine. What about you? What did you want to build? I wanted to build a family, I said quietly, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. A real one, where people actually care if you come home.
Where?
You don't have to beg for a scrap of attention. Aria's expression softened into something so tender it hurt to look at.
She
reached across the table, her fingers gently brushing the back of my hand.
You deserve that, Ethan.
You always did. Do I? I asked, turning my hand over to interlock my fingers with hers.
Then,
why did I feel so empty for so long? Because you were building on sand, she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed
tears.
You have to build on a solid foundation. The fragile piece of our domestic bubble was shattered 3 days later. Aria received an invitation to the annual charity gala hosted by her firm's primary developers. It was a high-profile event, the kind where the city's elite gathered to flaunt their wealth and influence. You don't have to go, Aria said as she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a stunning, backless emerald green gown that clung to her curves in a way that made my breath catch. Your head and the crowd might be too much. I want to go, I said, walking up behind her. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit she had helped me select from a boutique the day before. I reached out, gently moving her dark hair to one side, and fastened the delicate silver clasp of her necklace. Our eyes met in the mirror. We looked like a power couple, a real, formidable unit. You look breathtaking, Aria, I murmured. She flushed, her hand rising to touch the necklace. Thank you. Let's go before I lose my nerve. The gala was held in a grand, glass-domed ballroom overlooking the harbor. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, champagne, and whispered
gossip.
As we entered, several eyes turned toward us. Aria was a respected figure in her professional circle, but the sight of me on her arm, the man who had spent the last 3 years being dragged around like a lapdog by Chloe, instantly set tongues wagging. We had barely made our rounds to greet her colleagues when a familiar, sharp voice pierced through the ambient noise. Aria, Ethan. I turned to see Chloe walking toward us, looking radiant but furious in a crimson dress that seemed designed to scream for attention. Beside her was Leo, looking handsome but distinctly uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room, as if he wished he were anywhere else. I didn't think you'd actually show up, Chloe said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, her jaw tightening as she realized how well the tailored suit fit
Me?
Especially not together. Aria is one of the guest honorees tonight, Chloe, I said, my voice smooth and polite. Of course we're here. And you're still playing the doting fiance, I see, Chloe sneered, taking a step closer. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. How long are you going to keep up this pathetic act, Ethan? You don't have amnesia. You're just doing this to punish me because I wanted a little space. I looked at her, letting my expression turn to one of genuine, polite confusion. I'm sorry, do I know you well enough for you to speak to me like this? I remember you were at the party the other night and you called me on the phone. But beyond that, you're just a stranger making a scene at my fiance's professional event. Leo took a step forward, putting a hand on Chloe's shoulder. Chloe, babe, let it go. Let's just get a drink. No. Chloe shook his hand off, her eyes flashing with a dangerous, unstable light. She looked at Aria. Are you really going to let him do this, Aria? You're my best friend. You know he's mine. You're letting him treat me like a stranger while he lives in your apartment, sleeps in your... Chloe. Aria cut in, her voice cold as ice, a tone I had never heard her use
Before.
She stood tall, her shoulders back, looking down her nose at the girl she had spent her life trying to please. This is my firm's event. The board members are standing 20 feet away. If you make a scene here, I will have security escort you and your boyfriend out.
Do not test me.
Chloe gasped, shocked by the sheer authority in Aria's voice. She turned to Leo, looking for support, but Leo just looked embarrassed. She's right, Chloe, Leo muttered, his voice low. We're making a spectacle. Let's go. You're taking her side? Chloe hissed, her face contorting with betrayal. I'm taking the side of common sense, Leo said, turning to me with a nod of apology before pulling Chloe away toward the bar. I watched them go, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. But when I turned back to Aria, the coldness vanished. Her face was pale, her hand on my arm, trembling slightly. Are you okay? I asked gently. I need some air, she whispered. The balcony. I led her out through the French doors to a quiet, secluded balcony overlooking the dark waters of the harbor. The cool night air was a welcome relief. Aria walked to the stone balustrade, resting her hands on it, her head bowed. Thank you, she said quiet, for standing up for me, for playing along. I wasn't playing along, I said, walking up behind her, though I kept a respectful distance. She turned to look at me, the moonlight catching the tears shining in her eyes. Ethan, please. We can't do this anymore. The game has gone too far. Chloe is losing her mind and I can't keep pretending. It's killing me. Why is it killing you, Aria? I asked, stepping closer, closing the distance between us until I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Because it's not real, she cried out, the dam finally breaking. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It's a beautiful, cruel fantasy. You don't love me, Ethan. You love Chloe. You've loved her for years. You're only doing this because your mind is broken because you don't remember how much you adored her. And when your memory comes back, you're going to hate me. You're going to look at me and see the friend who stole you when you were vulnerable. You'll leave, and I'll have nothing left. I reached out, gently but firmly taking her wrists and pulling her hands away from her face. I forced her to look at me, my own eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to startle her. What if my memory never left? I asked, my voice low and steady. Aria froze. The breath died in her throat. She stared at me, her eyes widening, in a mixture of horror and disbelief. What did you say? I never had amnesia, Aria, I said quietly. The concussion was real, yes.
But
when I woke up in that hospital bed and saw Chloe's face, I just wanted to play a small joke. A stupid, childish joke to see if she'd get worried. But then, she pointed to you. She lied to me, Aria. She passed me off to you like an unwanted toy so she could go sleep with her high school sweetheart. Aria took a step back, her hands slipping from my grip. You knew?
The
whole time. I heard the phone call. I continued, stepping forward to keep her close.
I
Heard her tell you to pretend to be my fiance. I heard her say I was replaceable. I heard her say she just needed space and that I'd come crawling back because I loved her too much. Then why? Aria's voice was a broken whisper, her eyes wild with confusion. Why did you come home with me? Why did you pretend? Why did you let me make a fool of myself? Because of the omelet, I said, a soft, genuine smile breaking across my face. Because of the way you looked at me when I woke up. Because for 3 years I
thought you hated me.
I thought you were just another person who tolerated my existence because of Chloe. But when we got to your apartment and you cooked that omelet, I realized you knew things about me that the woman I'd been dating for 3 years never cared to learn. And then, I found your sketchbook. Aria gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, her face flushing a deep, vivid red. You saw. I saw everything, I said, my voice softening to a tender caress.
I saw the
years you spent watching me. I saw the love you hid away because you thought I
was happy.
And I realized I had been a blind fool. I was chasing a shadow, while the sun was standing right beside me, waiting for me to wake up. Ethan, she sobbed, more tears spilling over her lashes.
I
didn't want To ruin your relationship. I hated myself for loving you. I tried to stay away. I tried to act cold, but when Chloe asked me to do this, I was so weak. I just wanted to have you, even if it was a lie, even if it was just for a week. It's not a lie anymore, Aria, I said, stepping into her space, my hands rising to gently cup her face. I don't want Chloe. I don't want the games, the neglect, the constant struggle to be enough. I want the woman who builds things
To last.
I want the woman who knows how I take my coffee. I want you. Are you sure? She whispered, her voice trembling, her hands rising to grip my wrists, as if she were afraid I would vanish into thin air. Are you absolutely sure you won't regret this? I've never been sure of anything in my life, I said. And then, I leaned down and kissed her. It was nothing like the kisses I had shared with Chloe, kisses that always felt performed, rushed, or transactional. This was a slow, deep, and desperate pouring of years of unspoken longing. Aria gasped into my mouth, her arms instantly wrapping around my neck, pulling me closer as if she wanted to merge our very souls. She tasted of red wine and sweet rain, and for the first time in my life, I felt entirely, completely home. We returned to the ballroom hand in hand. We didn't hide it anymore. We didn't look like an awkward, recovering amnesiac and his patient caretaker. We walked with a quiet, undeniable confidence of two people who had found their anchor. Chloe was waiting near the exit, her arms crossed, her foot tapping impatiently. Leo was standing a few feet behind her, looking utterly exhausted by her dramatics. There you are, Chloe snapped as we approached. We're leaving, Ethan. I've had enough of this. Aria, stop this ridiculous charade right now. I'm taking my boyfriend back. I stopped walking, pulling Aria gently behind me. I looked at Chloe, the woman I had spent 3 years of my life trying to please, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, no pain. Just a profound sense of pity. You can't take back what you threw away, Chloe, I said, my voice ringing clear and steady in the quiet corner of the lobby. Chloe frowned, her eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? Ethan, stop playing. The joke is over. I know, I said. The joke ended the moment I woke up in the hospital. I never had amnesia, Chloe. The color drained from Chloe's face so fast she looked as if she might faint. She took a step back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You? What? I heard your phone call with Aria, I said, each word a cold, hard stone, dropping into the silence between us. I heard you say I was replaceable.
I
Heard you say you were bored of me and that you just wanted a little excitement with Leo. I heard you tell Aria to play the part of my fiance because you knew she couldn't stand me. Or so you thought. Chloe's eyes darted frantically to Aria, then back to me. Ethan, no, you don't understand. I was confused. Leo is just a friend. We were just catching up. You French kissed him on camera at a party 3 days ago, Chloe, I said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my lips. Don't insult my intelligence. You wanted space and you got it. In fact, you have all the space in the world now. We are done. No. Chloe lunged forward, trying to grab my arm, but Leo stepped in, catching her by the shoulder. Chloe, stop, Leo said, his voice firm, though his face was flushed with shame. Have some dignity. It's over. He knows. Get your hands off me, Chloe shrieked, shaking Leo off. She glared at Aria, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated hatred. You did this. You stole him from me. You were supposed to be my best friend, and you planned this entire thing. Aria stepped forward, her hand slipping into mine, her fingers interlocking with mine in a silent show of strength. She looked at Chloe, her voice calm, steady, and entirely free of the guilt that had haunted her for years. I didn't steal him, Chloe, Aria said quietly. You gave him away. You treated him like garbage, assuming he'd always be there to pick up the pieces of your
life.
You never loved him. You just loved having someone worship you. Well, those days are over. He's with me now, and I will never, ever make him feel like he is second best. Chloe started, raising her hand as if to strike Aria. But before she could, I stepped between them, my gaze turning so dark and threatening that Chloe's hand froze in midair. If you touch her, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, I will make sure your father's development firm loses every single contract they have with Aria's company. I have the resources, Chloe, and I have the motivation. Don't ever look at her, speak to her, or come near us again. Chloe stared at me, realizing for the first time that the gentle, accommodating puppy she had trained was gone forever. In his place stood a man who would protect the woman beside him with everything he had. Slowly, her hand dropped to her side. Tears of anger and humiliation spilled down her cheeks. Without another word, she turned on her heel and fled out into the rainy night, her red dress trailing behind her like a smear of blood. Leo looked at me, a complicated expression of regret and relief on his face. I'm sorry, Ethan. For what it's worth, she's all yours, or rather, she isn't anymore. Good luck. He turned and followed her, his footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. I turned to Aria. The tension in her shoulders finally broke, and she let out a long, shaky breath, leaning her head against my chest. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight, shielding her from the cold draft coming from the open
Doors.
Are you okay? I whispered into her hair. Yes, she murmured, her voice muffled against my suit. I'm perfect. 1 year later, the morning sun warmed the kitchen of our new apartment, a spacious, light-filled loft that Aria had designed herself, built on a foundation of concrete, steel, and a love that had grown stronger with every passing day. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. I stood at the stove, expertly flipping a golden, fluffy omelet. I had spent months practicing, trying to perfect the technique Aria had mastered so effortlessly. A pair of warm arms wrapped around my waist from behind, a soft head resting against my back. Is that for me? Aria's voice was sleepy, her face pressing into the fabric of my t-shirt. Only the best for my actual fiance, I said, turning around within her embrace to press a soft kiss to her forehead. On her left ring finger, a simple, elegant emerald ring caught the morning light. How does it look? She asked, gesturing to the plate. Perfect, I said, picking up the plate and leading her to the dining table. Unbelievably good. She laughed, the sound bright and clear, filling the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. As we sat down together, sharing the omelet, I looked around our home. There were photos on the shelves now. A stray jacket of mine draped over the back of the couch. Sketches of our future projects pinned to the corkboard in the study. We had built something permanent, something that could withstand the weather, the passage of time. I took Aria's hand, kissing her knuckles, and smiled. The storm had passed, and we were finally home.